Now it's time for the story of XRP. So what we're going to do, we're going to start out on the 4-hour chart and we're going to work our way up to see what the possibilities are for XRP. So on the 4-hour chart, what do we really see here? We see finally it's starting to close back above the 50 MA, back above the 100 MA, and it's making its way up to the resistance of the 200 MA on the 4-hour chart, which is 54,551, right? So when we add in the 8 and 21, we can see that they already crossed way back here, so that's a good indicator for momentum to continue higher. And when we add in the Ichimoku, we can see that currently it's touching the top of the 4-hour Ichimoku cloud. That is resistance, but the cloud just flipped green, which means that it should be able to press higher and higher to this resistance level. So what happens after 54 cents or so? So let's go to the daily chart. So the daily chart, we can also see the SMAs are all sitting up here around 56 to 58 cents. And so after it's able to break the 54-cent zone on the 4-hour chart, then it should make its way up to these averages. But as you can see, the cloud is starting to get in the way as well. So maybe by May 8th or May 9th, it'll start to be in the cloud and work its way towards the top. So what we're really looking for is possibly more time, maybe a few more weeks, a few more months before it'll be able to break through all this resistance and all of this cloud right here on the daily chart. Which, when we look at the weekly chart, we can see that price held this 100-week moving average perfectly. And as I mentioned many times before, since here, it's been a series of higher highs and higher lows, right? Higher highs, higher lows, and it's never closed a weekly candle below the previous higher low, right? Even though it wicked down here, it still closed the body of the candle still closed above the low of this candle, which which keeps the trend intact, okay? So what happens after that? So we saw on the daily chart that price is going to be stuck around 56 to 58. And on the weekly chart, where do you see the 200-week moving average? Well, that's exactly at 58 cents. So we can see that 58 cents will be resistance for some time until it's able to break above. And once it's able to break above, there still is going to be resistance of the cloud, whether that's right here in time or in June, or whether that's in July or August. The resistance of the cloud is still going to hold it down for probably more months, maybe even into the fall, right? So this is going to be a big waiting game still before we see price finally break above the cloud. And what we saw right here is an attempt to break above the cloud. And I was getting excited when I saw this attempt, but it was just a fake out as it went back to successfully retest this 100-week, right? So ultimately what I'm looking for on the weekly chart is starting to close candles above the 200-week moving average again, which is currently at 58, and then finally work its way above the cloud. And once it's successfully above the cloud and can flip that cloud to support is when the momentum will really start. So let's go check out Gann Square on linear scale next. So now we have Gann Square pulled up on linear scale from the beginning, or from the low point here back in June of 2014, right? And this green angle right here is my current 45-degree angle for the scale of this box, which currently, let's get rid of that angle, which currently has a height of $19, right? It has a height of $19 with this scale. So what do we see happening? What do we see developing here? Let's zoom in a little bit more. We can see that ever since right here, April of 2017, is when it finally broke above this first angle on linear scale with this scale of the square. And then as you can see, went up to the orange, back down to the purple, perfect retests of this range before it just exploded higher through that 45-degree. But you can see it even stopped right here, this wick. It initially stopped at that 45 and then went back down, and then the next week it just exploded through, right? You can see how well this works. And then it went all the way up to overshoot this angle right here, back down to the 45. And then what do we see? It didn't even hold it as support. It tried for a couple weeks, right? It wicked through once, closed above, wicked through twice, closed above. Then finally lost the 45, went straight down exactly, nailed the blue angle as support. Then bounced back up, almost back to the 45, and then back to the orange, and then it was just oscillating in between the blue and the red for a while. And then we finally saw the red angle break right here. That was the bearish engulfing candle that we saw that would break below to the purple. And then the purple was a magnet for price for many, many months, right? For a long time, since November of 2019 until it broke out in November of 2020. So for a whole year, this purple was resistance for XRP. Then what do we see? We see price shoot up to the orange angle again, back to the purple, back to the orange, back to the red. Tried to break above the blue, was just a fake out. And then we saw price go back to the red, back to the blue. You can see how well these angles work, how well they are respected. And that leads us to current day price, where it was stuck at that purple angle again for, let's see, June of 2022 until maybe about, we'll say right here, May of 2023, almost another year, right? And then finally, what do we see? It broke out. Then it got rejected by this gray angle. And back to down to the purple. And what do we see? It didn't even touch the purple angle until recently, a few weeks ago. And finally, we have that confirmation backtest of this last angle here, which has been important. If you look back in time, look how important this purple angle has been. Right here, which is May of 2017 is when it finally broke out. So this purple angle right here has been a very, very important angle for the whole lifetime, basically, of XRP. And now that we have a confirmation backtest, finally, after all this time that it failed to touch it, this is basically the low. This means XRP will not go lower than here based off of Gann theory, because it's already gotten below many, many times, and it took so long to finally backtest it, and it finally did right here. So where does that bring us next? Well, that brings us to working our way up to this red angle. But remember, we have the 200-week moving average around 58 cents right here in the way. Where does 58 cents line up when we look back on the chart? Well, here's 58 cents. If we go right here, there's 58 cents right here. 58, like, we can basically just draw a line where 58 cents is. Like 58.3. That red line, right? We can see, going back in time, how important 58 cents is. Right here, it wicked through 58 cents, 58 cents. 58 cents was huge resistance back here in September of 2018. Resistance, resistance, support, support. You can see how important 58 cents is. And right now, the 200-week moving average is exactly at 58 cents. So this is not a coincidence. So that's why I'm saying once we can start closing candles again back above 58 cents, then it's time to start going up again and closing these angles out as resistance and flipping them to support, right? So after we do that, it'll go to the red, then go to the gray, and then orange and blue, and then beyond, right? So we don't really know how long that'll take, but we can see one thing for sure, that this arc right here, it's ending in July of 2025, right? And we know once price is on the top side of an arc, then it's no longer resistance and it's flipped it to support. So then by the time that happens, it'll have less resistance of the arcs and only the resistance of the angles. And so we don't know if that'll happen in July, or we don't know if it'll just shoot up soon and start closing candles above earlier or later this year, right? So time is always the number one variable, so we don't really know when it's going to start closing candles above this arc, but sometime in the future it's going to happen based off of Gann theory. And the first thing we need to do is just start closing candles back above 58 cents in order to build that momentum to start making higher highs again. Now, let's take this similar scale and we're going to go check out the angles of the upward sloping angles and the downward sloping angles to see more confluence. So we have the angles pulled up, and I always like to keep my angles on a black screen. It just makes it a little bit different, just so I can differentiate it. So we can see same time back in 2013-ish, 2014, same time almost, and we have the same line here, and this line is similar to the last angle that we saw on the screen before. So what I added was, from the very top, a downward sloping angles, right? And this green one is the downward sloping 45. So we can see that price has never risen to the downward sloping 45. So by the time it does, whether it's next month or in 2026, we don't really know, because time is the biggest variable. But at some point, this 45 will be resistance, right? And we know that because when we looked back here, we can see that it was resistance a little bit before as well, right? So on the one sloping up. So eventually this 45 sloping down will be some resistance, and it could be up here around $1.32, or it could be over here where they intersect in June of 2025 at 95 cents, right? We don't really know. But is it possible that price could just slice right through and go straight up? Yeah, well, it kind of did right here. So there was a little bit of resistance here and a little bit of support on the way down. But yeah, price essentially just sliced right through this 45 going up, this 45 right here going up. So there is a possibility of that, right? But usually downward sloping angles, they act as resistance. And we can see that by this downward sloping 1-2 angle right here, how it was a magnet for price. You can see it sliced above really fast, but then came right back down to earth. And then what do you see? It was a magnet for price, a magnet for price right here. So what we really know now is if price did slice above, it would probably come back down to earth and be a magnet for price, perhaps, right? So we need to just have more patience. But you can see that these downward sloping angles do act as a resistance or a trend change, right? Like right here, this blue angle, it was a magnet for price for a while, but you can see when you zoom in, once it flipped to right here, it came back to retest it, then it never looked back, right? And once this one broke through with this bullish engulfing candle, it never looked back as well, right? So we can see something similar happen sometime in the future for it to slice through and then maybe be a magnet down and then go continue higher and higher and higher, right? And where does the last angle really lead us to? Right here, the last angle, this red angle up top, the downward sloping angle, it leads us to about $3, right? So we could see a $3 or even a high 2 sometime in the future right here. And once this last resistance angle gets broken, then we no longer will use this scale and we'll have to use other scales in the future. But for now, we're looking at least sometime in the future, a high 2 or a $3 XRP. Now, lastly, let's look at the Fibonacci for linear scale. Okay, so we have linear scale pulled up on the regular chart, and I said lastly, but it's not really going to be lastly because I'm going to show you log scale next, right? So, but before we do that, let's just pull up a Fibonacci from the swing high down to the swing low right here. And we can see that price is still being rejected by the 0.236, the 23.6% Fibonacci, right? It did break above and went to the 0.5 before, and it went back down to the 236, and now it's in the middle of the 0 level and the 23.6% Fibonacci, right? And so when we zoom out a little bit, we can see all the future possible resistance levels on the way up. So we have 86 cents, we have 133, 171, 209, and so on, right? So if we look further, where does a full extension land us on this scale? Well, it lands us exactly at $13.66, and that would be a full scale from the all-time high down to last low, the lowest low right here. So this is possible for this cycle, theoretically, right? Now, what are the levels that we see on the way down? Well, we see the 1.272 and the 1.414, which is in between $4.50. And I'm going to show you on log scale why $4.50 is important, right? And which is why I think a minimum price for XRP this cycle will be in this range right here, okay? So let's remember this, $4.63, $4.18, and in the middle would be around $4.50 or so, right? So let's remember this, and let's go to the log chart right now. So now we have the log scale chart pulled up here, and when I zoom out, I'm going to zoom out for you guys, and you can see it's from back here in 2014 as well, right? We'll pull that up, see 2014, around the same time period, right? But the reason why I said 450 is important because look at this 45-degree angle right here. The 45-degree angle, this green angle, you can see it was support, resistance, resistance, flip to support, support, support. This bearish engulfing candle right here made it lose support, and now it's resistance again. But where does this 45-degree angle end up? Well, when we scroll up, it ends up here at $4.59, $4.60, exactly where the other Fibonacci was, right? On linear scale. So log scale and linear scale, they're giving me similarities of why this 450, 460 level is important and why this is the minimum target that I have for XRP, right? Right here. So it could happen by July, August of 2025, or things could just shoot up before and get there much sooner because we don't really know. Time is the biggest variable. But let's pull up the Fibonacci on log scale. So we go to the swing high up here, down to the swing low right here. And we can see one thing, that price after the high, it went back up to the 786 exactly on log scale. So this was obvious a rejection. And since then, it was back in 2021, April of 2021. And since then, it's done nothing but go down to sideways, making lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, like so many lower highs. It's been ridiculous. So the first thing we have to overcome is that 58 cents, which was the 200-week moving average, right? The next thing we have to overcome is this 50% Fibonacci. And then what we really need to do is make a higher high from this 73 cents. So closing a weekly candle above this will make things go higher and go back up to the 786 and the 886 and ultimately the minimum target of 450 for XRP. Right? So there is a lot of waiting to happen. We don't know how fast or how slow things are really going to go, but it is ultimately a very bullish chart from here, from the low back in at 11 cents, higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low, right? The only thing that's missing next is a higher high. And once the higher high happens, believe me, this will take off. This will take off to this minimum target. So now we have this. Where's the maximum target? Well, on log scale, we've seen Bitcoin get to the 1.618, right? The 1.618 on log scale for XRP is at 2662, right? And if you remember the scale that I had on the linear chart, the maximum it went up to was $19. So this is kind of another confluence for the $19 to $26 range that this 1.618 is possible, right? So if we look further out on the 45-degree angle, if price was a magnet the whole time, where would $26 really end up? It would end up right around here in March of 2028, right? That's where it would be if it stuck to this 45 the whole time, right? So on log scale, 1.618 is usually a maximum for price to get. On linear scale, the maximum is usually the 4.236 full extension. And on both of them, they're looking around the $20 to $26 XRP for a maximum price, right? I know that seems ridiculous, but it is possible. So I just wanted to show you these confluences that I see. I just wanted to show you everything, how it lines up. And basically, it's really possible, in my opinion, for this minimum price right here, this blue line of 450 to be hit, and a maximum price of $26 to be hit by possibly 2028. So this is a bullish chart. The only thing missing is a higher high from here. But when that happens, believe you me, this chart will take off.